Hey everybody, major fantasy news here as Tyreek Hill gets traded from the Kansas City Chiefs to the Miami Dolphins. Now from a fantasy perspective, this is not great news for Tyreek Hill's fantasy value. There's a massive downgrade at the quarterback position, of course, from Patrick Mahomes down to Tua Tagovailoa. And the offense also is a downgrade as well. Also keep in mind, Tyreek Hill, how does he make his hay? Long plays downfield often. Last year, big pass plays, 20 plus yards. Patrick Mahomes was 6th in the league among quarterbacks. Tua Tagovailoa tied for 28th. That's not good. Tyreek's also going to have to face Bill Belichick and the Patriots twice a year, and the Bills defense twice a year, which is also bad news from a fantasy perspective. So for me, Tyreek Hill goes from being a top 5 to 6 fantasy wide receiver to now being more of a borderline number 1 or 2. Now, this is good news for Tua Tagovailoa because he adds a stud in Tyreek Hill, but I'm still not a believer in Tua. I think he's at best a mid-level QB2. And Jaylen Waddle, who is going to be one of my favorite targets in fantasy drafts next season, well, he goes from a potential number 1 fantasy wideout down to more of a 2 or a 3. He had 140 targets last year. That total is destined to decline with the cheetah in the mix. All right, let's move on to the Kansas City side of things, and it's not good for Patrick Mahomes either. I get it. He's been maybe the elite quarterback in fantasy football over the last 3 or 4 years, but now I have him dropped into the QB6, QB7 range because he's lost Tyreek Hill, who has made up for about 27% of Mahomes' fantasy points in the last 2 years. He's still a QB1, but unless Kansas City makes some moves at wide receiver, well, his value will certainly fall. One player whose value will not fall, Juju Smith-Schuster. Now, he's a totally different player than Tyreek Hill, but the targets now should be there. So Juju goes from a guy who is probably more of a wide receiver 3 or 4 to someone who could be in that wide receiver 2 conversation, depending on what the Chiefs do at wide receiver the rest of the offseason. So folks, for all of the best fantasy and betting information, make sure you're checking out si.com/fantasy and si.com/betting.